somebody could interrupt your line and switch over to phone calls. And then, of course, we had answering machines. The idea that we could now go out and do our task without any sort of worry about not missing a message because someone was actually recording that, or something was recording that message in the background. But fast forward to these. Sometimes I still forget that this is really primarily a phone when there's a camera on here. Example, that's one part of it. The idea that you can text people. Hopefully not driving, but definitely you can text people when you need to talk and when you need to say something very brief and important. The other thing about this is the number of apps, which apps sound very light, but it's just another form of software if you think about it. The idea that we can have apps like for social media, that is another form of communication.
To do that, you need to turn on airplane mode.
And then the other thing is you also have Siri, which can also interrupt from time to time. Put this off again. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay. So I'm a big Clubhouse user, by the way. I use, for those of you who don't know what Clubhouse is, it's a social audio app. It allows you to communicate with people in a virtual room in live time. So I don't quite have a picture I can show off of here, but again, the point is that there's a lot of different ways. It's almost to the point where you forget that this is supposed to be a phone. Now, why do I say all this, and what does this have to do with Juneteenth? Well, it's the idea that I think now that we have so many different ways to learn about culture, about what it means to you individually, what it means to your community. And these sort of things are just, they are things that help us to grow and that give us more information. But also digitally can also be a little bit of a challenge as well too. Again, when I get to my presentation, we'll get to that. But all these things I think are, I think of all these things, I think about Juneteenth and the idea that, way back 1866, there was information that was being given to a group of people that took a long time to do. And then fast forward to now, and after the industrial age and the technology age, how we get information very, very quickly. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming, but other times it helps us to make better. It's supposed to help us make better decisions about where to go, what we'd like to do during the day. Information or news that we would like to hear more often. Those sort of things are, to me, when I think of Juneteenth, I think of just how far we've come, and how much, and probably how much more what's more is going to come down the road as well. Another thing to think about is with culture a little bit too. Sometimes I mentioned my story about how I just sort of heard about Juneteenth through Ebony. That also was an inspiration for my presentation too. But one of the things I think about is how much that, some of our experiences, be able to ask questions about our experiences. We're also limited sometimes to maybe what we hear in a magazine, or let's say even if you have that auntie or uncle in the room, somebody could talk about something a little bit more in those articles as well too. I grew up with 3 sisters and my mom, my dad, and so we had Ebony, Black Enterprise, and a whole lot of Essence. So basically going on.
No jet?
So, and there was a jet in there. There was a jet slid in there.
I think it's a Chicago magazine.
Yeah, so yeah, gotta represent, right? But a lot of times my discussions with my mom, in particular, there were things that she used to say that I didn't quite understand growing up. That when I got to Prairie View, and I got to hear other experiences from other people, that sort of a light bulb would go off a little bit more. Like, oh, okay, this is probably what she meant. Or, oh, okay, I remember her saying something similar to this. There's a connection here. I'm not sure what, but we'll roll with it. Your experiences help shape how you view your world. And a lot, like I said, we're in this age now where, again, our experiences are not just coming from what's in our home and our tribe, but it's also coming from how people have connection to these devices that we use and how we see these things as well. If I had not gone to Prairie View, I probably would not have, not that I would never gotten around to appreciating Juneteenth in the way that I do now, but it probably would have been, it probably would have taken a different meaning, basically. Somebody who had been from Galveston, who's been around when, every year when Galveston celebrates Juneteenth, that person really kind of, that one experience helped shape and at least got me more curious. Today, we have a lot of things and tools that are supposed to help us to learn and build, and we have to I would say we have to take better advantage of it to learn how to communicate with each other much more, and learn to communicate not just saying hi, but learning about opportunities and things that can grow and inspire us. So let's see here. I apologize. This is very. I'm trying to strike the balance between formal and informal here, so bear with me. I being from analytics, and my background was not within computers. In fact, I'll be honest with you. A lot of things that I loved about cars was a driving force for me for up until how was I right about 4? I know I was in my 30s, but it was a driving force for me. I was like, I want to work in the car industry. I want to be an engineer. Had no interest in computers, none whatsoever. I thought programming was just a foreign thing. And kind of what got me to where I am now is a series of events. Just like with Juneteenth or anything with culture, there's always events that grow and develop. And that's true for all of us, basically. Oops.
You went to sleep.
Okay. Forgot the computers can sleep too. But there was always little experiences that helped shape me for computers at some level. During my time at Ford, did not do anything on the job, but had a little fascination with email. Many of us remember that that scratchy modem sound that would come on, basically. Some of us remember PlayStation 2s and PlayStation 3s at that time, but that's okay. But you remember those scratchy noises, those things of getting an email. The whole concept of email was different. You're no longer waiting for that moment of a physical mail where the post office worker comes up, has the bag, takes out whatever mail that they have, plop it right in their mailbox, and goes on. When I was a kid, that used to fascinate me because I used to get car brochures through the mail. I used to make model cars out of cardboard. That was my hobby. That's what, again, had an interest in automobiles. And having, I used to write away and ask for car brochures. And sometimes I would write to foreign countries, basically. Would write from Ford to Germany. Hey, I would love to make a cardboard version of Ford Capri. Can you mail me a brochure? And I would get brochures all the time. But as an adult, gained email. Please come in. As an adult, getting email is fascinating. Now you're kind of talking to people, all over the place. Fast forward to grad school, and I got my first laptop during that time. That was a big deal for me for two reasons. First of all, was used to desktop computers. I was one of those people that had a IBM Aptiva, if I remember the name correctly. It was a black desktop, and had that at home. But now getting to grad school, you need to have a laptop, like this one here. Portability, something you can do your assignments on and then bring them into the classroom, basically. But one of the interesting things I loved about it was I found out I could rip music and have like a little CD collection on my laptop. You know, that stunned me. That surprised me. Because now I can have music with me wherever I go, just about. And then fast forward to, I'll get to the analytics part a little bit. Fast forward a little bit more to got done grad school, contractor in Huntsville, Alabama. Had my laptop at that time. I actually had an Apple. At my first Apple, I had two friends of mine totally said, "Hey, Peter, you gotta get an Apple laptop. They're great. They last a long time. They're great." But what about Microsoft Windows? Like, no, I like my Apple. We'll go with that. I'm like, okay, whatever. And during that time, I started to learn a little bit more about the internet and websites. In fact, the contractor I went to work for was actually started by my cousin. I have a cousin, Nita Williams, and she had started this logistics company. They work with the government with government contracts, helping people to understand where their manage a lot of their equipment basically at different sites. Some of them were like Fort Hood, I think if I remember correctly, was one of them. Some were not necessarily military, but they helped them with that. And in that process, getting to the website part, one of the things that kept coming up was, well, here, how do we know that people are looking at our website to get a sense of how to work with us or develop a contract with us? They had actually fired some people earlier who mismanaged their contracts, and now they're trying to figure out how do we do this more honestly. This is where I learned about analytics and Google Analytics. And that experience taught me so we've gone from all this personal use to now another experience, business. That taught me a little bit about not just the mechanics of analytics, like adding a tag and JavaScript, which I had to learn. That was the first time I was learning about JavaScript. But it taught me a little bit about, how do you ask questions? It changed another experience for me as a business person to learn what questions to ask, what things to think about. And then one more experience, I get one more. We'll get to the AI in just a moment. Another part of this that really was very interesting for me was, having these things with analytics, trying to figure out data and trying to figure out all these metrics and try to get answers for business owners, which eventually started my own company. Then that brings us to AI, a whole different layer. I know that, many of us have been hearing about AI from start to finish, back and forth for a couple of years now. And that's understandable. It is a very dynamic medium right now. It has pretty much enamored the world. But I think part of the reason it's enamored the world is because it's bringing another set of experiences to people that some people may not have had before. Some people who have had, for years, have had graphic design. Now they have a tool that can help streamline a lot of their nuanced queries. For data analytics, if you're trying to explore data to figure out what's the data in each column, are there missing observations, are there missing columns from data? You now have a tool that can at least help you with that initial investigation. All of these are experiences that have helped, for me at least personally, has helped me grow. And you've had those experiences as well too. And that's partly, again, what I think about with Juneteenth is that first step of experiences. That first step of something that would make a difference in how, at least it was supposed to make a difference for how, at that time, people were supposed to be treated. And it's also a little bit of a reminder of how information can hit us at different points in time. Just as much as I've told you a lot about my background, there's probably somebody else who's had a background with devices. I remember this from a wider media. One person said, "Hey, I didn't start off with laptops. I actually started off with, if I remember correctly, I think it's the Simon Says. Does anyone remember that toy? Simon Says? The one
Flash
with
the
little
colors,
lights?
you had to repeat the colors that it flashed.
Yes, exactly. For for them, that was their first experience. They actually opened that toy up, and I can't remember what it was they did. They were trying to do programming from a programming perspective, but they were tinkering with something around in their house because that's what they were exposed to. And that's, again, it's about experience. It's about getting that first experience that broadens your world. And those are the things I think now with AI that we have to also keep in mind. Is that, again, it's broadening a lot of people's worlds. Some for good, some with some caution as well too. But overall, it's one of those things that's reminding us that as we live, as we go through life, there are things that will broaden our experiences, and it's up to us to kind of keep paying attention to those things as we go along. So what we'll do, okay, so I'll watch my watch here. Okay, so we're doing a little bit well here.
Don't stress that much about the schedule. Don't stress that much about the schedule.
Yeah, okay.
Today's a flexible day.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying. So what we'll do is let's do this. I'm going to jump into part of my presentation here for this, but I just kind of wanted to give a little thought starter about Juneteenth and probably not only just what it means to me, but what it could possibly mean for you as well too. Again, those initial steps. So I'm going to pull up my presentation real quick. We'll jump into that. All right. Okay. This is sort of a presentation part 2. I've done a presentation for the Juneteenth conference about. It was an online version, so at least I know it was during COVID, so at least a couple of years ago, basically. And this is sort of it's on YouTube, so it's still the video's still up. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about what's happened since then a little bit, which I think is neat. So I titled this with a wonderful title: "What does the algorithm know when the algorithm knows the culture?" What AI, agency, and economics means for Black community today. So a lot of this is going to be a little bit of an economic thing. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about is I'm going to give a little bit of, some of these will have a little bit of a recap to that earlier presentation. I wasn't sure if, this part I kind of was a little struggling a little bit because I didn't want to leave out certain parts, but I also want to kind of make sure some things are new. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the events that have changed media and consumerism for African-American communities in particular. I want to also talk about the increased influence of a digital platform. We have different digital platforms now that not only, we don't see it as just software, we don't see it as just social media, we see it as a way of communicating, of being connected, of building the experiences that help shape how we see our worldview. And it's that increase that has, there's been some benefits from it, and there's been some non-benefits from it as well. And then what I want to talk a little bit about this is that how, some touches about how AI, and I use the word evolution a little lightly here, but how much that evolution of AI has influenced not only the platforms, but maybe also the community as well. Forgive me for going back and forth. I do not have a clicker. That's okay. So I won't go through this too deeply. I know that most. Let me back up and ask a question. Is there anyone here who has not heard Juneteenth at all, like before today? I figured it'd be a no. Okay. Okay. Good. So some of this is history that you've heard of already. I mentioned about it. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. And then the 13th Amendment was passed by Congress in 1865, ratified by by 27 states on December 6th. This was before that. And then General Granger led the Union soldiers at Galveston, Texas, and announced the emancipation to almost a quarter million slaves. But goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier. We had a moment in time where something was declared, but then years before it finally hit a certain pocket of the country. And I know that's a lot of it's just because of the nature of the technology, quote unquote, at that time. But it also says a lot to how we are today in terms of speed and how we can do it.
I'd like some context to that, if you don't mind. I'd like some context to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Because each one of these, I think it's significant that they affected more and more people. So a lot of people don't realize the Emancipation Proclamation did not announce the freedom of all slaves. It only announced the freedom of slaves in rebelling states, in Confederate states, which of course meant nothing because the Confederate states were not enforcing that. They weren't going to free their own slaves. So if you were a slaveholder in Kentucky, you were allowed to keep your slaves in 1863 because that state did not secede from the Union. And when the 13th Amendment was passed, as you pointed out, some slave owners conveniently forgot to inform their slaves that they were free. So it wasn't until Juneteenth, was that 1866? Is that right?
1866, yeah.
The Union soldiers finally came into Galveston. They went to other cities before that, obviously,
Yeah.
and announced it. And that was finally, they got to the very last of the slave owners said, you know what? You're not forgetting, you're deliberately disobeying a federal law. And so it took years for something that was well-intentioned to actually be implemented. And I think you'll agree it's still going on today, centuries later, a century and a half later, whatever. Sorry, I just want to
No,
I think it was important context that
that's perfect.
how slow this is.
And also, which is the point, which is a big part of the point.
I'm emphasizing what you were saying.
I don't know if it's a quarter million slave on that. This is a slide from my last slide like 4 years ago.
It sounds like a plausible number, the total number of enslaved African Americans in the 1860s. But I don't have the number in front of me, but it sounds plausible.
But to David's point, that slowness was a big part of and again, it was the technology of the time, but again, the number of steps, number of process back and forth is notable. So when I did my first presentation, I talked a lot about agency. And I talked about the experience from that as being a first step towards agency. Now, agency, that just says agent. Okay, I had too much AI in my brain when I was typing. So, but agency means like an action or some sort of intervention, especially such as to produce a particular effect. So the idea of something that some activity or something that has a purpose or destiny behind it. And so when I did my first presentation, we talked a lot about. I purposely talked about the growth of the Black middle class, starting from like the Great Migration and onward. But one of the things I touched upon, which we'll talk a little bit more here. A lot of times we use media as a form of agency, as a way of connection. So, for example, we had the big three: Ebony, Jet, Black Enterprise. Did a lot to provide information and a lot to highlight lifestyle trends. So it was a way of learning about again, if you're a young man in Gary, Indiana, or a young lady in Gary, Indiana, and you wanted to hear a little bit more about what was going on in Baltimore or someplace in Atlanta. The thing I remember as a boy was Black Enterprise. I don't know if they still do this or not, but they used to list out the number of minority-owned car dealerships. They used to do a pretty good ranking from year to year, basically. So that was always interesting to me, but to me, that was the only magazine, the only place I could find that could do that kind of thing. And the reason why these three stood out to me is because of the fight for advertising. That was a big deal. There's actually a book by Earl Graves that talked a lot. It's a really good book because he talks not only about Black enterprise, but it's also he had a pretty good relationship with Johnson for Ebony and Jet. He used to talk a lot about trying to get advertisers to come and advertise for in their magazines, and say, hey, there's an audience that is willing to pay attention to your brand if you just would pay attention to the audience. So his book really talks a little bit about some of the ins and outs about that, which is really good. It's good history now too. But that was one medium. And then of course you had movies and TV which featured Black characters. I say showed elements of culture. And the reason why I say elements is because there's only so much that people will show through a TV show. At that time, those times in the 70s, programming like Good Times, The Jeffersons, you move forward, you look forward at the Cosby Show, when the Cosby Show was on. And in between all of that, you had Soul Train, where people would sit, would dance, and that would be an expression of people coming together. But all these things were sort of a window into a world, which is what TV was designed to do, and movies as a world was designed to do. Spike Lee, I remember growing, I always look forward to a Spike Lee movie almost every summer, just as much as I look forward to a Prince album every summer. So I remember what those things were, basically. And that leads to Black musicians, which, over time, gradually broke into the Billboard Top 100. There was always the R&B chart and everything else, but particularly, if you've seen the biography from Michael Jackson, there's a scene where he talks a lot, where he's talking with, I think it was the executive for MTV, and trying to convince the show Thriller and Billie Jean on a fledgling channel, and could convince, despite all that background with talent and drive and entertainment, still had to kind of fight for that quite a bit. That's that moment. But these things were also gradually becoming part of view where not only Black audiences in different parts of the country can enjoy, but also mainstream audiences can also enjoy as well too. So we had there's a lot of media that plays into this in terms of messaging that is part of how we move forward. And this and now is kind of moving towards where we are with again, I mentioned about the smartphone. How much that has changed our discourse or options for where we have conversation about our media. There were studies going, I think this has to be going back like way back maybe like 20, I want to say 2019 or earlier, but I have to go back and find the quote on this. But there was for consumers, for Black and Hispanic, we were definitely using mobile. We were kind of the first, not sort of the first, but definitely were using mobile much more with intention and much more at length. So we were always indexing higher for groups as far as from a consumer standpoint. With digital, with mobile devices, you had creations of subgroups, and I need to explain this a little bit. If you were watching TV, listening to music during like the 80s and maybe so much in the 90s, sometimes it was always hard to get a little bit of Black culture into the medium. But if you go online now, particularly it started with Twitter, but I think even now Threads is starting to pick up the slack ever since Twitter became X. A long story with that. But you have interest groups. This actually should be affinity groups more than subgroups. People who were Black who are interested in comic books can now get together, maybe on a Reddit or maybe on a particular group within Clubhouse, which I've seen that in Clubhouse. People who may have interest in following the stock market. People with these sort of additional interests, as long and with a little bit of culture mixed in, we're starting to appear. Again, first was Black Twitter. And a lot of this was also an offshoot of not just media, but also like a lot in terms of consumers being able to interact with their brands online. This is an example here. This is, you see here is the honey pot, which there was two reasons why I had this on here. One is that this shows a communication with the customer. So this is honey pot, telling you that they have, that their products are back in stock. And you have a comment here from a customer saying, it's honestly ridiculous. I have not received any shipping updates since I placed an order on March 17th. I have sent emails and gotten no response. Then today, you guys have the audacity to send me an email asking me to review a product that has not been shipped yet to me yet. And then a response from Honey Pot, go ahead and DM us. The reason why I put this here is because a couple of things. All the media that we've had up to the point of digital has always sort of been one way if you stop and think about it. If you were listening to Michael Jackson's Dangerous album in the 90s, that was me. But, for 2 years, you could not get me off of that whole Teddy Riley, Michael Jackson mix. It was still, I could enjoy it, listen to it. My imagination could imagine what the video would be for Why You Want Trip on Me, which was the second song after Jam. Good combination, but I digress. But the point is, it's still one dimension. It's me experiencing it without maybe having a discussion with anyone here, for example. It's me experiencing it maybe with headphones. Or me just kind of, I can keep it to myself at some point. Same thing if you are, it's somewhat the same thing if you are watching a movie at home, if you're watching it on tape. Now, there are other ways to be communal. If you were watching a movie in a theater and everyone in the theater is rooting for the good guy to take out the bad guy in whatever favorite movie it is. It's communal, but it's still kind of a small group, basically. Something like this is a little bit more exposed, where ideally it's still between Lash and Honeypot, but as community, it's still this sort of, it's still between them, but it's digital, which made it searchable. And that's kind of the difference in this, is that when I say unprecedented exposure of, I say Black issues and lifestyle, but to be honest with you, this could also be for a lot of different groups, basically. And we'll talk about that more as I move forward. But it's an exposure of communication, basically. In this case, for brands, in terms of consumerism, it was a kind of almost a great thing, because now you can see a customer's comment, or you can see a group of customers complain about something, and you can respond to it. That was one of the initial benefits of social media at that time. But as we'll talk a little bit more, not everything that goes online is about a brand either. So that's something you have to kind of keep in mind. But that also means that there's variations of platform communities. Another that have become a cultural third place. And I need to explain what this third place means. A third place, I can't remember who was that came up with the quote, but it just means that you think of home, work, and then there's a third place that you would normally go just to hang out. Ideally, it might be, if you go back to, again, days of 70s, 80s, it could be sitting on a front porch step with maybe a few friends. It could be a park. The third places were not always, we don't even really call third places. There's just a place to go. A library could be a third place. This phrase, third place, got to be applied to Starbucks. And the whole idea of going someplace for coffee. Yes, you had Dunkin' Donuts for a long time, but no one ever hung out at Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, if you have, you can raise your hand. It's a safe space, that's fine. But the point is, a third place was some place where you could sit down, relax, actually talk to people. Third place became places where consultants would come and sit down with a customer when they didn't have an office. And then eventually third place actually became an office, co-working spaces, places where you would go to talk and communicate. So all these things are physical. With things like social media and platforms, they also became a third place. This doesn't show this, but even something like a hashtag. If you think about how a hashtag is used, we see it for all sorts of social movements. We see it for sometimes for something commercial. It's also used as a third place for people to meet and share ideas as well too. I have one quick example. I'll say that for you. So all of this was made possible by a larger trend that was going on in the world, and that's in terms of technology. And this is something I talked about in my last presentation, but I thought it was good to kind of reiterate this a little bit. Because a lot of this is how the world has been shifting, basically. If you go to here, all these things that we've had, these tools that we've had, the stone tools, bronze tools, this is all the BCs, iron tools. So you had things that were basically transforming material into things that you could use. The idea that you can have a sword that you use to defend your kingdom with. The idea that you have an axe that can help chop down a tree to make some sort of table or some sort of chair. These were, taking materials and crafting them into something that we can use as a tool. And then you had a time where you're transforming not just the physical tools, but transforming energy. This is just basically a very fancy way of saying we're going to use energy to power something. You have all sorts of different types of power. You have water power, which again, you can have for a windmill to create or generate, to do a mill, to do grinding. You can have steam power, which locomotives took advantage of very, very, very well. You can have electric power for things that power your lights. And then you also have, this has combustion, it has combustion power. This is basically ICE, internal combustion engine, on automobiles. The idea that you can take gas and air and put them together and burn fuel to power an engine in an automobile. So you had all these things that had energy for a while. But now we're kind of in this sort of transforming information age. And so you have communication around storage and information, and then you have computing information as well. So all of this is sort of an interesting dynamic. We think of data, for example, as being in a database, something that just gets stored away. And data is kind of almost a very loose word if you think about it. It could be, we've had data for a long time, we just never called it data. Any sports team, I know we joked about the Knicks and World Cup soccer, but any sports team you want to look up and see what their record was. That's data, that's information. Medical records as well. You have data information as well. And up until now, most of that has had some sort of storage someplace. You need a little bit of SQL to kind of retrieve it, bring tables together so that we can get the right information together. All that was, I would call it manual, but it wasn't as convenient as what's happened in the last few years. You didn't have sort of layers to manage things with. And that's what a lot of things like with we've had advances with programming languages. We've had with AI, which definitely has accelerated that. We now have another layer that we can not only gather information, but to do actual computation. And to what I said about smartphones, I keep forgetting that this is a phone because a lot of times I think of this also as a computer. The idea that I can actually use this to work with Claude or some AI models is fascinating. And I think even Visual Studio Code, if any developers in the room, please correct me if I'm off. But the point of it is that we have more things that we can blend data together. So by doing that, that means that we have more capability for not only the media that we use, but also how we are using the information around it. We can create a lot of times documentation can be stored as data. We have video, audio that's been digitized. That's a big deal. I have a buddy of mine, we still discuss a lot about DVDs and the merits of having a MP4, basically. We have a huge debate about that, a long story. But the point is that our media is no longer on a tape. I still remember videotape, and I'm still stunned that we've gone from videotape to these discs, and now to like video files that can be downloaded and be played. We have an adoption of broadband, an adoption of internet signal that's gotten better, more capable for us to do more. Cloud services has lowered the cost for storing some of this data. And then, of course, better computing that's made it easier to manage and bring these things together. So, all this leads into AI and algorithms. And actually, the irony is, I actually went to Claude and asked, I said, hey, can you come up with a very simple definition of what an algorithm is? And the simplest one is, a set of rules or instructions that a system follows to make decisions or complete a task, usually based on inputs it receives. And as I mentioned from the previous slide, there's a lot of inputs now, a lot of inputs. And we are at a point now where we're trying to figure out how do we manage this. That can make a big difference if we're talking about things of culture. If I had a database filled with a lot of the writings of great African-American writers, how can I sort that much better? How can I come up with a list of quotes from that might be related to, let's say, cooking, for example? How do I get that much faster? How can I come up with creative ways of listing those things out? Even with sometimes the best programming in databases, there's still this manual piece of imagination. This part has elevated that now to where it's a little bit easier to come up with such lists, with such ideas, or at least give some guidance on it. So what does this mean to the culture? And there's a lot of things here. I particularly, again, being the theme for Juneteenth, this is aimed a lot at where our culture is now, but this could also be for a lot of different things as well too. The things to keep in mind is that when you're scrolling through your social media, you have an algorithm that is deciding what you want to see next based on what you clicked, liked, or lingered on. This is not a surprise. This is what we know that exists. But what it means is that this impacts the stories that we see, things that we pick up on. That can even start impacting how we talk about those things in our daily lives. If we're watching a lot of media, I've got some stats here that will talk about that. That means that, yes, we know what Juneteenth is, we know what the Harlem Renaissance is, we might know these different points in history, but for trying to follow where things are going now, we have an algorithm that will basically just respond to what you're clicking on. That can be good or bad depending upon what you're clicking on, basically. That means that we have messaging that can reach people in unexpected ways. If you go back and look at that honeypot example, again, that's on a social media platform. That can go out and reach out to people that honeypot has never expected to, even though that they're just responding only to that one customer. It's the ability to craft images based on different sources is now possible. Again, using, we heard about AI image creators and AI video creators. And there's a lot of debate about, how those creators are actually pulling those things together. What is it using as its IP source? Those sort of questions are coming. And then algorithms don't just reflect culture, they actively shape it by surfacing certain voices, trends, and ideas. Sometimes, which can be a good thing, kind of gives a bigger reach for something, but it also means that there may be some of those voices, trends, and ideas that are kind of getting buried a little bit. Just because someone didn't click on it doesn't mean it wasn't important. And that's an important aspect to keep in mind. Many times algorithms on platforms are designed about, what's the most popular. For business people in particular, they can have almost a blinder thinking, okay, this is the most popular, that means that represents some amount of interest. And that's not always true. You still have to research more beyond that to get to understand why that's happening as well. So that's something to keep in mind. So what does this mean for economics a little bit? So what AI brings to the table is a lot more than the hidden figures, definitely. I always love this picture, basically, because I didn't realize that people were referred to as computers at that time. If you even go back in the movie, they actually referred to, I think just for Catherine, I'm pretty sure that there's a couple of scenes who referred to people as computers, basically. That was, of course, before the IBM came to play in the movie. But the idea is that there's this opportunity to have, to see a shift in the skills that you typically use to communicate, to talk, and to create. AI just provides a layer that allows you to do certain things. And so again, it can do some things in a streamlined way, but it also means that you may have to think about how do you instruct that model. Right now, there's a big discussion about agentic AI, about how models can be used for different tasks. And so if you're using it for different tasks, what are the guardrails for those things? What are the rules that you want to establish that keeps those agents to do the tasks that you want them, the tasks that you want them to do? Again, that takes skills to do.
I'm sorry, can we ask a question?
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you what. Yes, go ahead.
You said this word and I didn't quite hear you
Okay.
about, in the context of this, what you're talking about right now. You mentioned right now we're looking at, what was the term?
It's okay, that's all right.
Say more about it.
I mentioned about you talk about the term computers, what they were calling the people in
No, just right now in the context of what we're talking about now, you talked about the transition into we're looking at now.
agentic AI.
Is that what you said?
I said agentic AI.
Objective?
Agentic.
Agentic AI using artificial intelligence to communicate in a natural language like English, and then have it in the context of some document or application or data, or so you can ask questions about what is this? Help me write an email about this. Help me write a paper about that. Or help me understand this code that I'm writing. That's agentic.
Yeah. Agentic. AGENTIC. Agentic.
AI is applies to agents. Agents are the things that do what I just described.
I'm sorry.
No, do not be sorry about that. Let me say one quick thing, actually. Because on Clubhouse, with clients, and I've also been an adjunct professor a couple of times too. I always hear people ask a question like, what is that term? And I don't really quite understand. I love that you're asking the question. Ask it. Don't just sit back and say, I don't understand. What this lady did right here was perfect. That she was even if you're like, well, what was the thing? Going back and forth helps me to understand what she's asking for, and also and as well as answering her question as well too, and even bringing somebody else in to also help as well too.
Absolutely. We had a talk last night in this room about quantum technology, and I had so many questions. Everything is going over my head.
So that's So so feel free. If I'm saying something, stop me right there. Just ask. That's more important. But the point of this is that there's a lot of fear mongering right now about will AI take jobs? There have been some layoffs, but also there have been companies that have walked it back a little bit. I think with technology, there's always a struggle in how it's being applied. That can also be a good thing in some ways because it opens the debate of how it should be used. And even we're talking about using it for the culture, for example. Like if you're, there's an example I'm kind of itching to get to, but I'll get to it in a moment. Things that might really be questionable, like, the use of images with AI, facial recognition, that's another one as well, too. I wrote an article for CMS Wire where he talked about, I can't remember the gentleman's name. He was in Detroit. He sued the city because of a face recognition program that had identified him as a criminal. And they literally came to his house and arrested him in front of this young boy. And I'm pretty sure he won that for sure. But it triggered off a lot of discussion about facial recognition being used. It's used a little more for machine learning, but it's kind of the same realm, basically. It's the idea that you're using that one technology just to confirm a judgment without using other record or other information to help also, that really should be used to help confirm something rather than just using the one thing. So when I say skills and shift, I'm saying that there's also some opportunity to challenge, not only from professional growth, but also to challenge what the uses are going on out there as well. I mentioned an opportunity to build software. This is something that kind of goes back to the agentic AI discussion as well, too. There's a huge discussion on the idea that you can create systems to create the software you want. And that opens up a flood of possibilities for people if you're entrepreneurial. The idea that you can, instead of just asking a developer to come up with an app for your business, which is kind of where we've been for a while, to something where now I can, as a small business owner, technically I can actually have a Claude code actually come in and systematically build a trial software quickly. It's a game changer. It means that a lot of times that you have an opportunity to create a tool rather than just doing it business as a service. A chance to build a tool that can actually help service your customers better, even help grow your business by being able to take care of tasks that normally would be manual. So there's that's what I mean by saying opportunity. And then AI basically also has a chance to enhance those third places, the digital venues. That could be helpful for creatives who are trying to figure out, trying a new way to express themselves either through imagery or through audio. I have a buddy of mine who is pretty enamored with sumo right now more than anything else. But he told me that it's helped him on his creativity part because he used to sit down with the keyboard and guitar, and he really had problems trying to stitch together an idea that he wanted in his head. But he's found a way with sumo that can help take certain recordings and bring them together for himself. So that could be a great way for something creative. And then my last point off of here, AI, it's offering in some ways a path for entrepreneurs to gain and to garner investment. And what I mean by this is that pretty much every business at some level will have software. In fact, to be honest with you, we're probably at that point already right now. Even if you are the simplest service and you're using Excel to plan out something, congratulations, you have software. If you have a website, now a website is a website, but most people don't realize that's just another form of software. We're all at some point reliant on different variations of software, whether it's invoicing software, again, websites. Again, it could be even if you think this is more by API, but even if you think about services that allow you to take payment, for example. All these are variations of software that allow you to do business. And AI is just adding another layer that may also help build that and take it further for you as well. So there's some opportunity here. And these opportunities do impact, they impact small business, and it also impacts Black-owned businesses in particular because of the fact that it opens the door for different ways of doing service with people. I'll say from my end of it, I'm from analytics. I've worked with people all over the place, and that would not have been possible if none of these tools were around today. How many we're going to talk? Pretty good.
It's 10:40 right now.
10:40. Okay. All right. Okay. That's good. We'll wrap up here in a little bit.
Don't stress about the time. Seriously.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what has been emerging as a result. These figures are within the last few years. I don't have the sources on here, but on the deck, I will have the sources updated and make sure if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to send it to you if you like with that. But a lot of this is with software and a lot of these opportunities that gives people a chance to do business with each other, allows businesses to work with each other in a way that hasn't been there before. The experience of Black-owned businesses was supposed to help people from the community find services within the community or nearby. That had always been the case, even with Green Book, when Green Book was supposed to be more for safety, but that's still another way of fighting businesses, basically. But people still.
I think a lot of people don't know what Green Book is.
Oh, okay. Is there anyone else who doesn't know what a Green Book is?
I saw the movie, so I know.
Okay. Well, the Green Book is I don't have the slide here on here, but it was on my first slide. It literally is a book. Think of it as kind of like a Yellow Pages of sorts, but it was designed to help Black motorists find places to stay, restaurants to stay, where they would not be harassed or run into, not allowed to eat here, basically. That was very particular in the South. And so what the Green Book was around up until maybe, I think, I got to go back and find the slide, I think like 1960s or so. In fact, I don't want to switch. I won't switch it right now. I'll take it till we get through these slides. But the point is, it was a way of, at one level, yes, it was a way for safety, but it was also a way of finding people when you were traveling to different parts of the country. And at that time, that was the medium that was available. Today, with all these different things with the internet, we're in the time that we're in now, there's different ways of connecting and finding Black-owned businesses, and it's not always necessarily a Black-owned business in a traditional Black community. This product here, is the name on here?
Hairbone. Oh, it's top of it.
Oh, I got the name of the title. I'd have to go back. But this was taken in a Target store. And before the boycott, let me say that. But the point is that there are people that found ways of putting their products in a Target, in a Walmart, in maybe on a national department store. And a couple folks, I've had some people say, well, that's interesting, but that's not the same thing as before. I said, no, but it's part of the reason why people were able to do this was because our demographics have shifted in different parts of the country. You have different areas. You have some areas that were, areas that had always had traditional Black communities. Gary, Indiana had one. Chicago has, Detroit, and so forth. But over the years, there have been suburban or next door suburbs that have grown as large as the city. Best example I can give you is Indianapolis. If you look at Carmel, I think it was Carmel, Noblesville, and I want to say there's one more. I think it's this Carmel, Noblesville. Those are the two biggies. Carmel is a very affluent suburb of Indianapolis. In fact, I think it's probably the most affluent one in the state, because I think it normally ranks. But there's that, and then next door to it is Noblesville. And those two areas combined actually have, if I remember correctly, I think they have as much population as Indianapolis. And also it can be also is much more diverse as well too. So the places where people are going to find certain services or even products have sometimes shifted. If you're in a Noblesville, some people do go into Indianapolis, but some people might want to find something a little bit more closer to home. Those things have been happening much more so. Even Gary, Indiana, for example, I'll share this much. Gary, in its heyday, was about 170,000 people. This is about 1970. But it also experienced white flight, which is the shifting of the white middle class into the suburbs. Now, places like Chicago, Detroit, those have experienced that as well. Those were big cities. Gary's place in this is not, and I'm not trying to put Gary at the same level as Chicago, but there are places that were Gary's size that also experience different things like that. So you can think of a Flint, you can think of Saginaw. Gary's population now is closer to 69,000, I think, if I remember correctly. So it's been a gradual change over the years. Part of it was that white flight, and up into the 90s, you have more people closer to my age who they've grown up and moved away. But when people were moving away and out, they always moved to different places. Maryville, which is to the south of Gary, which was the suburb that got built up. I still remember there was only 10 families in Maryville that were Black out of a population of 10,000. Today, I think the population is roughly 12,000, but I think it's 45% African American. Places have shifted a little bit. And so I say all this to say it made it a little easier and even probably a little bit more of those demographic shifts paved a way for having other places to pop up where people can find services and so forth. So this is some of the trends that came off of this basically. Black buying power saw a 31% increase from 2019 to 2024, reaching 1.8 trillion. And then it's projected to go to 2.5 to 3 trillion by 2030. So every time you hear something like buying power, it's just basically how much consumers are spending. And then most reports that cover this usually break down by types of goods, basically. So you have some where when it comes to culture, people they index higher for a particular product or good versus another. So you can kind of get the breakdown for that. Discretionary spending reached $259 billion in 2025, and this was up from 2024, representing 14% of total U.S. discretionary spend. These were numbers that Ebony, Jet, Black Enterprise. This is what Johnson and Graves have been trying to fight to prove basically. And these are coming from companies now today, like Nielsen, I think does a really good job covering it. Gartner, I think does a good job. I think also covers this as well too. But it took a long time, it took a number of iterations to get to, and shifts in population to get to a point where not only people started to notice, but they started to track the types of spending that's going on. But back in the early days, it was a fight to get that type of attention. And this is more data here. I'm not going to try to go through all of this entirely. There's some more interesting factoids in here. The reason I focus on consumers and shoppers in particular, again, this goes back to, like I said, it really was a fight to get advertisers to start thinking in terms of spending towards the Black consumer. And that also affects programming as well, too. Remember I mentioned about TV and in some cases movies, really. The idea of, you know, the advertising is also linked to what TV, what TVs or TV shows are produced based on, and how you keep that attention. So there's a lot of different factoids in here. And and a couple of these I'm going to highlight are a little bit more media oriented. 6 in 10 Black consumers are early adopters and super influencers across entertainment, tech, shopping, and culture. And by super influencer, this is kind of it's not really a term, but it's more the idea that that remember I mentioned there's categories for buying power. It just means that we may index highly for certain categories based on it. And cultural leverage is now the central brand strategy frame, not just aggregate dollars. And so what this is saying is that consumers are spending where they think their dollars are being respected. That's a big part of it. Black shoppers account for 20% of U.S. luxury spending. One of the highest shares on record, and notable departure from the prior decades focus on value categories. And I think part of this is aspirational as well too. Remember that magazines like Jet and Ebony, not that they ever really focused on, in essence, to a certain degree. Each part of those talked about lifestyle, and it talked about aspiration. That was one big part of that. And I think this is part of that part of the behavior that's emerging is also about aspiration as well too. You try to get the best. You've earned your dollar, and you try to get the best goods in the process. This one's a big one. Streaming now accounts for 45% of Black adults' total TV time, with YouTube as the leading platform. First of all, YouTube gets a lot of play. They really get a lot of attention across the board. There's a data on podcasters in general that YouTube is competing against Spotify for. And then on top of it, you have YouTube Shorts, which YouTube, I think there was a study. They were talking about how what people are doing is they actually are looking for YouTube Shorts and looking for little nuggets of information and then watching a longer form on the YouTube channel. So that behavior is starting to emerge just in general, basically. But this is really important because of the idea of media access to messaging. The idea that we can stream what we want when we want is a huge difference than in the early days of TV, let alone cable. The idea that, you could, cable was always about you could stream things, but again, it was always shown repeatedly based off of somebody else's schedule. Whereas streaming, you still have it's more control for the consumer. So that's been a big deal. Let's see what else I'll be here. This is more entertainment. There was one more if I had. Oh, here's these two big points here. Black consumers say they're willing to shift $260 billion, almost 30% of spend alternatives, and the brand doesn't align with the causes that they care about. Values are a big deal now with companies, and part of it is that I think businesses have learned to attract customers. They've learned how to listen to customers and realize that's an important value. They've learned that lesson well. I do think one of the challenges that's emerging now, and we see this with things like Target, is the idea of, how well are you sustaining that? The minute that you start retreating off of that, you almost take a step back and say, why are you doing this, basically? But that's also part of messaging, knowing when a step back from something might be a negative impact. This was a quote I had from Earl Graves. This is a quote that I had from Black Enterprise. I think this is his son, because I see blushing there, basically. This is his son. When I joined the company in 1988, we were having challenges with advertisers. No matter what we would tell them, the advertisers didn't believe it. At that time, we had about 500,000 subscribers, representing a large audience of middle, upper class African Americans with needs and desires and investments. Definitely, he's talking about with Black enterprise, the whole, anything with finance, anything with in terms of business. Even in 1988, there was a lot of struggle to try to get advertisers to think about that magazine. And that magazine had been around for a while by that time. Basically, I can't remember how old it is now. But the idea that they had to fight to get advertisers to wake up and say, "Hey, you have an audience." That has been a long fight. So, this has something more digital. This is cut off here. Let me see. Hold on for a second. Okay, so that seems to be cut for some reason. I apologize. I thought this slide. I'm gonna try to talk through this. I won't dwell on this too much, but it's a shame. This is some of the AI stuff I want to get to. So part of the reason I put this in here is that we talked a lot about the consumerism, Black business, and the messaging that was available. Some of this also deals with a lot of the technology now that's impacting messaging, what and how you hear it. There is how we spend our time is a big part of it. This one here, number of consumers are spending over 81 hours per week with media. That's a huge difference. That's a huge difference from the days of when we were told that we had to go and watch so much TV. I still remember that. If you remember that, you can raise your hand to say so. But it's now we have a lot of media that comes in over time.
Excuse me, is there a distribution curve on that 31%? Does it differ by socioeconomic or educational or age brackets?
That's a good question. My answer is I don't 100% know. The Nielsen report probably will have that, or at least some sort of discussion towards that. Nielsen, by the way, is really, but this has been one. Nielsen, eMarketer, which is eMarketer is really good. Like it's really good. Gartner, those are kind of like the big three that I follow. And Nielsen does a really good job of diversity as far as spend. I've used these three in my articles for analytics and digital marketing for CMS Wire. A lot of times to help, when I'm making points, they usually have really good research points.
Yeah, question. So traditionally, don't those agencies have a bias toward the 30 to 45 market segment in a non-POC standing? I worked in marketing, in advertising. That's what I have experienced. Now, have those been modified in the last 10 years?
Yeah, in the last 10 years, yeah. They have done a lot. There's a lot of reporting that they've done that's looked more at different subsegments. So it's not just that they usually do a pretty good job of not just looking at it and say, okay, Black consumers who purchase beauty supplies. They'll break that into more of a demographic and do a lot more reporting on that. Nielsen, they've done a better job in the last 10 years. I would say, yeah, they've done a better job of that, basically. Because I've seen reports come up and they've delved into that a lot more. This one got cut off here. I'm really sorry about this. I just did not know this one. But I do want to point out there's a couple little factors in here. Half of consumers have replaced traditional search with Gen AI. 71% want AI integrated in the shopping experiences. What this means is that there's a couple of things that this is implying. Again, people are adopting AI into their consumer behavior. AI is starting to have a lot more influence in terms of what comes up. When I go to Claude and I ask a query, I ask, say, hey, Claude, I'm trying to look for information on X, Y, and Z. when Claude or ChatGPT or these days Perplexity or any Gen AI, what they'll do is that they will look online and look at what the sources are online that's available. Now that says a couple of things basically. They're trusting that what they're getting online is relevant information. For the most part, that could be true. The thing I like about AI now that they should have done at the very beginning is that when you prompt, it will actually show reasoning steps. It'll say, yes, I see what you said here. Let me take a look at to see if I can find sources to answer your question. And then you can even see the sources being that they're picking out. And then when you finally get a response, you should be able to see on there a little link that shows what the online reference is. And you can use that to help check, at the sanity check to make sure it's giving you what you want. But for the most part, they're pretty good about trying to get that information. But it's also saying that AI is sort of picking an interpretive step for you rather than say like on standard search, you're typing in your question, you happen to have a keyword, and you can look at each link and you kind of make a decision for yourself. Okay, this link looks like it's what I want. AI is kind of doing a little bit of the part of that search load for you at a certain level. Which means that it should be familiar enough with things that might be important to you. If you're a consumer and you're a shopper, and you're concerned about things in the culture, it should be able to consider those experiences within its response at some level, ideally. That's an important deal. That just means that you're letting something interpret a prompt for you rather than you typing in a search. I'm not saying that's bad or good. It's just saying that it's a different experience, basically. Which means we have to think about how we're getting our answers and if they make sense, basically. There's one more thing off of here. Here's okay, this is more sponsorship thing. This part with the AI, I did want to know, but there's a demand here for having AI integrated in the experience, at least from a shopping standpoint, and that consumers are starting to use AI to replace traditional search. So those two things are there. I've got a couple of slides to go through here. So a lot of this is saying that our media and communication, it's been evolving for a while, basically. Again, I mentioned about the idea that you don't have to experience a movie or a song just by yourself in a small group. You can have more people can experience something potentially in very unexpected ways. This was the Ask Rachel hashtag. I thought this was funny, by the way. I have to be quite honest. This was Rachel, I can't remember her last name. I think it was Dolens. I might be off a little bit. But she was the lady that was representing the NAACP in Seattle. There was a controversy because, Dalzone? Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And she was the one that was, for those who don't know, who may not remember the whole story, there was a big question mark on, was she black, basically. And her family came out and said, no, she's not black, she's been white for, and she ended up losing that job. And so on Twitter, there was a sort of a game that almost came up of all these things with black culture. And people would post these things up and you have like an A, B, C, D, Ask Rachel, basically. I thought that was sort of an interesting response. It was a very funny response to that, basically. But it just kind of snowballed into something cultural. But the point of this is that it's a broad communication, that sometimes we don't see the endpoints of where the communication is. If I'm just standing here talking to you like I am now, or maybe addressing one person, maybe addressing David, maybe addressing this person, that person. You can kind of at least see a two-way going. With digital, you have to assume how far things are going just because of the fact that you're on a screen. So it kind of makes it a little different to appreciate. But it just means that, again, that the media that we have, the communication that we have, means that our information can be transported to more places than we expect. There are more expressions from the real world that start to extend to the online. This is why I have it sitting here, because it's kind of, again, it was a real world event that became a game that lasted. This went on for days, basically. And just one more thing before I leave this point. It doesn't have to be something humorous, basically. It could be something serious. Clubhouse, for example, the social audio app, hosted a virtual room with, I believe it was Israelis and Palestinians talking to each other for days. And it's social audio. So imagine some people being in this room, asking questions, talking to each other, bringing up important points. But imagine doing that they did that, I think, for at least 2-3 days, maybe longer than that, nonstop. And it was interesting because nobody was really arguing. People were just making their points, basically. And it was very, very civil. And it kept being civil for 2 days. For Clubhouse, that's a big deal. But the point of it is that, again, that was people coming together to talk about real world events in a third place, being extended online. But also what this means is that with all the data I mentioned about, purchase trends are being much more noticeable, which that can bolster cases for investment for products and services. It also means that people can notice a little bit more about events and what's going on. Just the idea of Juneteenth. Like I said, when I was a boy, I remember reading about Juneteenth. I remember little blurbs in Ebony. But it wasn't until I got to be a college man in Prairie View where I finally got to go to Galveston and got to see a real celebration. I know Juneteenth has been celebrated in different parts of the country, but Galveston's always been, just like Mardi Gras is associated with New Orleans, Galveston's been the source of Juneteenth. And I noted this a little bit. This is more of a data analytics, Data, we always talk about it as some sort of metric, but it also can mean, from a culture standpoint, you're also measuring behavior, basically, in some ways. How much people are responding to a particular piece of content. Is there getting a response online? The purpose of things like Google Analytics, web and original web analytics intentionally was you're interpreting what somebody is, you're interpreting the number of metrics on a web page as interest on a particular type of content on that page. And so that interpretation was always this sort of, I'm imagining someone in front of a laptop. Over time, it became imagining people opening an app or opening a mobile phone. So those sort of behaviors, you have to imagine more about what was available for people, whether they can order something on an app, whether they can purchase something through a mobile web page, for example. So that's why I put this in here as well. There's an influence on analytics and data analysis that increased because there was now more capability to kind of interpret the trends and reveal things that might be important, basically. Another one that might be good off of this is geospatial analysis as well. I won't stick on this too much, but this is also another example of products or services that kind of it's more than just looking for things around the way. This is Upland Nearest, which I know many of you have heard before. And I put in here, I know this is more of a, oh God, I just forgot her name. Starts with R. I cannot remember.
Rihanna?
Who said it?
That's a brand.
Fenty. Who's the artist?
Rihanna.
Rihanna. Thank you. I don't know why I get stuck on her. But the reason why I point these out is because it's most times we think of people who build things within community. But sometimes these type of businesses where they get a lot of national attention, there are things that can also help draw attention to where people should be looking for a product or service basically. So, that economic influence is central to the value, influence is central to the value of Black-owned business, but influence has shifted. This goes to, again, digital platforms, larger investments, maybe having a national platform associated maybe with a vendor, and also just shifts in demographic as well. Now, not everything with AI is perfect or all good. I tried to find, I have more examples, but I wanted to stick with this one. This is the most recent. I thought this was interesting. TikTok and Instagram got rid of a couple of AI influencers that cosplay Black women, basically. So in other words, the profiles, a lot of the dialogue, influencers are really supposed to be people, basically. With your macro influencer, maybe a mini influencer. The fact that AI, that people can have a burner profile, something that they can kind of hide behind. This is something that's been at risk really for a long time. There's nothing stopping people sometimes from going online and not quite, being themselves, whether it's it could be a pseudonym, somebody can have a profile picture that's not quite it. They were very particular about this because of the fact that this was AI at the forefront of this, and the fact that the influencers weren't who they were. And it becomes a whole ethical question of, are you, if you're going to peddle to the community, are you genuine? Are you a real business, real person? And that's not to say even real people sometimes run into trouble, but you definitely don't want something where people are doing things for using deep fakes or variations of it for profiles. I think there is legislation. I want to have a page in this. I didn't quite get a chance to put it together, but I think I know there's not national legislation on this yet, but there's a lot of discussion on it. I think there's at least a couple of states that are actually looking into having legislation on it. And I know that YouTube in particular has been really big about labeling and making sure that people are who their profiles are claiming to be, or that they are putting something that's AI oriented. I think in terms of maybe a video, that there's at least some sort of marker on there. But this is a big deal because of the fact that, and the reason why I call this out is because of all of the stats that we've looked at and talked about. People are spending a lot of time online. They are spending a lot of time, and while, yes, being a consumer is part of it, a lot of this impacts messaging. It impacts how our story is being told and who thinks that they can tell us. Those sort of things that we'll have, and this is something we will keep facing over and over again, basically. So it's something to kind of keep in mind, basically. So what must be in our agency to kind of deal with all these things that are coming up? The simplest answer is that just being vigilant is a big part of it. We have there's a lot of things that are good digital agency that can help you online to connect with people and connect with folks who can really help be that third place that is useful for you. Looking at there's open source environments or platforms where teams collaborate, where people collaborate, things like a Discord is used very regularly. People can connect and communicate with others real time. And this is also where something like a Clubhouse or social audio is big help. You want to encourage those corporate partners who want to partner with the community to have the right engagement. This goes to a whole discussion about, Costco versus Target. The idea of, you stayed invested and you didn't pull out the investment just because it was convenient for you to do so. And we want to make sure that there's exposure to companies that, that's the wrong word. Avoid companies that are not invested into the community as well. And bad agency are the things that we try to avoid. Predatory actors, again, that TikTok image I just showed is a big part of that. Knowing when communication online devolves into harassment, making sure that people are not trying to harass people online, or harass, if you're running a business, harassing your business online. Insisting on data privacy policies. How do people manage data and manage information? And then you want to be able to question, where possible, if there's AI usage that seems to diminish the online experience. And this is, again, going back to that fake profile, for example, as an example. So there's a lot of small things that you can do. And these are just kind of this is kind of a variation of something I had from my previous presentation. But there's small things that we can do as entrepreneurs and business owners. There are some things we can do as consumers. So as business owners or as entrepreneurs, or even, and this also can go for nonprofit activity as well. You pick products and services with an eye for your community needs. What is it that you can offer that people really need? Not just sell it just to sell it. Unfortunately, there's still people who look at something and say, person A is selling this apple, person B is selling this apple. I should sell this apple. You can also sell this other fruit that you can also sell that would be just as beneficial. Engaging in active digital communities, not just static directories. This one I think is kind of important. Many times I've run into clients, I've run into people where they just say, hey, I just want your name on my directory. That might have been fine in 2007 or 2006. Today, people are thinking about community more often because you can do more online to talk to people directly and get a better sense of who you're working with. Michael, I met him online even before the last conference. I'm trying to remember if it was LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn or Twitter, one of the two. It may have been Twitter at the time. But the point is, there's a lot of developers I've talked to who I didn't meet them in Gary, Indiana. I met them online, and we actually talked about tools, information they were looking for, information I was looking for. In other words, the communication was dynamic, it was purposeful. Those sort of things can help you stick with groups that can help build resources for you when resources are not nearby. You also want to seek collaborations that raise, and I use the term cross-functional economic advantages. And this is just a fancy way of just saying, when you collaborate with people, is there something there that that you offer that benefits that person, and something that they offer that benefits you, or something that helps raise for everybody all together. There was an incubator here in Chicago. It's called Blue 1647. Got turned into Blue Lacuna when they moved over to Pilsen. Actually, in Lawson, Pilsen. And Neil Cambry, who I have a huge amount of respect for, he's a great guy, really tried to bring home the point of having entrepreneurs working with creatives, so that way there was more innovation and more opportunity for everybody. And it was very cross-functional, very economic. It was a great idea. Unfortunately, COVID ended up shutting down the incubator because it was a large space they had just moved in. Unfortunately, just because we couldn't move around for COVID, that became an issue. But the idea was still very, very sound. You want collaborations that where people can collectively work together. Now, as consumers, real quickly, I'll go through this. What should we do as consumers? Well, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. it's a lot of times people just are already conscious of their purchases, but we have to think about when those purchases can be misused. That's a good misuse, right? As support for bad actors. In other words, it's easy online for someone to come towards you with something, say, "Hey, this is for the good of something," and then not be what it is. So you always want to keep your eye open for that. If, from the, just from information's sake, pay attention to any legislation that impacts AI development, data privacy. And I put voting rights in here because I think a lot of times, to me, this supersedes everything else here. The idea that a lot of times data privacy, particularly now, is so federated you want to pay attention to how people are protecting the rights for consumers, and how much you can leverage it. I know right now the whole thing with in Memphis, the whole redistricting is kind of a big deal, but those sort of things can help pay attention to them, and being better informed can help keep things moving forward. And then the last point here I'm going to say is just always keep evaluating groups where support and online actions are creating the outcomes that you want to see. And a lot of this is just more or less keeping your awareness up as a consumer. So all of this, I'm going to say, this is my last slide, basically. All of this is about agency. A lot of things with a lot of the history that's been talked about has always been about, agency. What is it that it's up to us as a community and help keep things moving forward? A lot of this is now about also protecting that agency as well. So doing what we can it will always be up to us. Okay. Now that's my last slide. So I know we're talking quite a bit. So let's do this. First of all, are there any questions that anyone has? Any particular questions or anything that I brought up that anyone wants to ask or talk about?
I actually want to roll back much earlier in your presentation. You were talking about face recognition and AI, and particularly in this month with Juneteenth and also Pride, looking at there is a new initiative in certain niche areas to start using facial recognition to allow access to adult areas like bars. And this is starting a huge backlash, specifically in gay bars in San Francisco. They're starting to use facial recognition to allow or deny people access to bars. And so this is now creating a kind of a green book kind of experience where people are now feeling that they don't want to go into those spaces because they don't want their identity cross-tabulated across multiple AI registries, as that is their only identity registry point.
Okay.
How do you think we should move forward with guide rails on a societal level not to use that kind of road marker?
That's good. That's a good question. I think right now, this is why this gets into like data privacy.
That's where I was going with this.
Yeah, we don't have a national policy. That's driving me nuts, frankly. We really do need one, because if having it too federated means that you now have 50. Right now, I can't remember what the number is, but it's not all 50. But let's just say that each state has its own. That is a lot of work for a company to match up to, for something nationally to match up to, A. B, the facial recognition, now to your point about a bar, I know it's a little more local. Actually, I just thought about something, I'll hold that off.
I was tying it back to what you were talking about, how a false positive,
Yeah.
and this is where I'm getting, that you're creating a possibility of entangling someone who doesn't deserve or doesn't even identified that way has now been tagged because AI has said, this is that person.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of twins, I'm thinking of,
Thinking
people
of the
that
guy
have.
in Detroit, that AI just flagged him as a criminal
Yeah,
because he
and
kind of looks similar to some other criminal.
And then when I was in the Bay Area, there was a case study where there was a biometrics company that had one female engineer, and they used their biometric software to allow access to their secure spaces or security use your own product. But she could not, even though she was the lead designer, she could not get into the areas because the software was denying her. She would have to go get one of her male counterparts to facially recognize in, and she'd have to, again, break the security protocol, follow them in.
I'll chime in here. Microsoft is slightly addressing this. When we first introduced facial recognition software, our cognitive services, it was freely available. We were proud of it. It was so cool. Look at that. You just take a picture of John and it recognized that's John. And so, hey, yeah, now I know it's John. I can customize my response to that. A couple of years ago, Microsoft took away that rights for people to do it. If you want to use, because people were abusing it. In fact, police departments were abusing it. The U.S. government was abusing it. And using it to profile black people, for example. And just some pretty nefarious stuff. So now if you want to use Microsoft's facial recognition software, you must ask permission and tell the reason why. Now, that's not perfect, but at least it's some human being is going to review that just by it. Now, it's also not perfect because there's lots of other facial recognition software that doesn't have those kind of broad things, right? But it's a start. People are starting to recognize the points that you're bringing up. And to your point, I think we need some sort of national policy on this. And even that's not a start because the U.S. is not the only country in the world. It's very easy to use technology from other nations that is developed outside of the U.S. It's really hard to regulate that. But people are starting to recognize this.
Yeah, there are some, I think there are.
We should probably wrap up the next speaker.
Yeah.
Finish.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap up here. So, which is, that's why I have to thank you. So it's okay. But I would say this real quickly. There's a lot more. I think Detroit. I know there's cities that have not jumped on the. They've actually there's city legislation that has said that they will not use facial recognition. Detroit, I think, ended up picking that up. I know New York did, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there needs to be something more national, basically, to get into that because it does become a slippery slope. We have some states having a data policy and some states not. So, all right.
Hey, why don't we take 5?
Yeah, let's.
Bring the next speaker.
Yeah. Okay. So stretch your legs. Stand up. If you haven't gotten a muffin, he's got a muffin.
We're actually doing okay on time. We're a little bit behind, but one of the speakers didn't come, so we're okay on time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, all right. So we'll take 5, and I'll introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Oh, I just plug it into here. That's all right. Just keep on going. I have, is it this one here? I'll need a.
I have it adapter.
Good. I have USB-C here.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Thank you. And go ahead and plug in there. I'll be up in a second just in case there's any issues.
Okay, so McDonald's logos. Oh, yeah. This is one of the
Hi, you want me to? Oh,
Yes, good to see you again. Yes, it has. Thank you. I always hear your phone call. And then did you do? Yes.
I did on there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to talk to you more about what Microsoft is doing with facial ID as part of multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, you can, or Windows Hello is right there.
Well, yeah, I do.
That's built in, but that's one-on-one. You have to opt into it.
Yeah.
And so privacy is really a non-concern. Once you consent to it, you're good. That's really our biggest thing with multi-factor authentication, Windows Hello.
With, I have a mobile workforce, and they outline that, this is one of the things I'm struggling with, because I have a workforce that goes out in the community. Insured individuals.
Okay.
And my people like to hide, and they don't like it too. Way.
All right, so plugged in. I should do it like this.
No. Good. Let me know. You need pictures. Yeah, feel free to take pictures. That I definitely like.
Is this I'm trying to. I was using YouTube to do a live stream, so actually, I should tell you we're online right now. Just so you know, this is what people are saying. This is only a few people
It's
watching.
not, it's
But
not
so,
connected.
right now, so I went to edit here, and webcam doesn't give me an option, which tells me that this didn't detect this probably. So if I just
You can, sorry,
plug and plug it back in.
you can just, so this one doesn't work?
Oh, you're right. Let's show up here.
Can you go into your,
Look at my devices.
yeah, I was just gonna say that.
So let's see. Where are we here? Cameras. There we go.
Integrated, I think that'd be that one. Let's see. Let's check the second one. It would be that.
I was thinking, even
Let's see what happens if I unplug it. Does one of those disappear?
No.
It doesn't. That tells me that. Wait, hang on. Yeah, that tells me probably it's not detecting it. There's not like a power switch on there, is there?
No, I use it all the time. It's definitely doing something.
It flashed when you do that.
Yeah.
It might not be. Let's see. Is there another else in here? Firmware. Other devices. Let's try that.
Oh, maybe that? Maybe the USB connector? Is there anything down here that came up when I connected it?
Good call.
Like, like when you, let's see.
Let's see. When I do this. I don't see anything there.
Okay, well, it's worth a
You know what? I
shot.
think I'm going to switch over to
Yeah.
Dan's laptop.
Okay.
He has a front camera on his, which will be a little easier.
so easily to jump over and be used in different places.
Oh, I'm covering that, Sean.
Oh, that's why. I didn't want to offend you.
So I'm with Southside organization right now. So we're a nonprofit, and we look to move uninsured individuals to pro-life to declaw ERs.
You really still take
Your project.
No, I manage all systems. We are 5 years old, we just moved to physical orders. And everything was very virtualized. So I'm spending a lot of time reining people back in because they had a lot more time. It's hurting cats. It really is. Kind of establish whose job is to go out and to harmonize with the community so they can, be.
So everyone a little long, I couldn't tell.
Oh, no, hey, by the way, we're on camera here, so you know, no, it's fine. I just want you to be aware of it. It was good, but because one person canceled, we have some extra time to fill. So your slot is coming up in the afternoon, but you're not going to do it because you just did it. So it's best if you go. It was really interesting.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you for also jumping on. Quite was on the emancipation.
Oh, yeah, this is, I always wonder, was it 1866, or like over a year later
Yeah.
that it took?
I do have a
Time
US
frame, which is
adapter.
significant, I think.
We have an
All right, we're gonna switch over to a different video. I was broadcasting on my YouTube channel. I don't have a camera on this side, is the problem. So Dan brought his Surface. So we're gonna go with that way. If we knew in advance, we would have planned things a lot better.
I want to make sure she gets
All right. Did your AV stuff work okay? Everything good
Yeah,
over there?
everything's good. So
And
I'm
you
just,
probably don't need a microphone, but do you want one? There is one if you want. Let me show you where it is.
Just those things. Just that little basket.
I talked about that, so like the.
We actually had a grant specifically for children.
That's amazing.
So we've been on a lot of social media recently with our doula stuff.
are you, I think you said your camera's on, right? Okay.
My bad.
You're set up with the video.
Don't worry. I'm on just playing. Yeah, I mean, just yeah.
All right, if you're watching online, we're going to switch over to a different video. Watch my LinkedIn and social media for the link to this. I'll put it in the comments here what the link is to the new video feed. Bye.